What's up, everybody, and welcome back to Fireside Giants. I'm your host, Anthony Rivardo, joined by my co-host, Alex Wilson. And today we want to discuss Trey Hawkins' New York Giants draft pick, a late-round pick that the Giants made in the 2023 NFL Draft, and how he could potentially be a starter one day. Jeremy Fowler of ESPN recently mentioned that the Giants view him as an eventual starter for their defense, and that the Giants feel like they drafted two starting cornerbacks in this draft class. Of course, Deonte Banks in the first round, likely a day one starter opposite of Adoree Jackson on the boundary. We're super excited by Deonte Banks, first round draft pick out of Maryland. Looks like a really good prospect that we're very high on. But Trey Hawkins, Old Dominion cornerback, kind of slept on, went under the radar, had a really nice combine, a very athletic player with some good size, some good speed, and a player that the Giants, again, are very high on. So we're going to go ahead and discuss what Trey Hawkins could potentially bring to the New York Giants in combination with Deonte Banks, and how the Giants are very confident in this draft class already and feel like they might have stolen two starting cornerbacks in the class and what that would mean for the team. But before we dive into all of that, make sure to leave a like if you do enjoy this episode. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Comment your thoughts on the topic down below. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, Alex, how are you doing today, my friend? And what are your thoughts on that Jeremy Fowler quote about Trey Hawkins and how he could potentially be a starter alongside Deonte Banks?
I mean, was this our Legion of Boom draft class? I mean, this is ridiculous in terms of the sense that the Giants went and got after prioritized athleticism, and we know this, right? Deonte Banks, 4.35, 40-yard dash. He's one of the best athletes in the last decade, guys. Not just this year. He was the first-ranked cornerback in terms of athleticism score, but he's one of the top three in the past decade. This is a player who not only is extremely skilled coming out of the collegiate level, but he's also athletically gifted and moldable, and he's a really good guy. So everything points in the direction of Deonte Banks becoming a star cornerback at the NFL level, and he fits our scheme like a glove. So you love to see that. We all anticipate he is starting. He is our CB2 alongside Adoree Jackson, and the idea here is he'll eventually be our CB1 when Adoree Jackson's contract eventually expires after the 2023 season. So you lower the costs. Maybe you go out and get another CB2 next year, or someone that's on his level that can compete and, best man win, and you end up splitting the share of the reps anyway. But Trey Hawkins, guys, this is one of those under the radar players that Joe Schoen went after because his athletic profile stands out, and it's one that you can mold. He's a really good kid coming out of Old Dominion. We've seen the Giants go after some of these smaller school players before, notably O'Shane Ximines, and I think that primarily the reason that they've struggled in the past is because our coaching wasn't very good. And Ximines, a lot of potential. He actually had a pretty decent start to last year, and I think the coaching helped him a lot. Giants brought him back on a really small deal, so we'll have him as depth, a player that we were really familiar with. But Trey Hawkins III, 6'2", 188 pounds. This is a guy with tremendous size, tremendous strength, and just a great frame overall. So when you're looking at Hawkins, what he can do is that he gives you an athlete right off the bat. I anticipate he'll probably start in the punt squad, maybe as a gunner. But what I like about Trey Hawkins the most is that his weaknesses are very coachable. And by that, I mean a lot of them are vision-based, just football IQ, lack of reps against top tier talent. I think that Trey Hawkins, with his frame and the fact that, he's a really good kid, obviously great work ethic, you're going to see this type of player get better with more reps against NFL level talent. So when you watch the Giants in training camp, and you watch them at Fan Fest, and you watch these guys taking the field and going after each other, watch Trey Hawkins, because, Jeremy Fowler says, obviously, he thinks these two players are impact players, Banks and Hawkins, but ultimately, I like Hawkins a lot because his weaknesses are not physical. They're very coachable. They're very fundamental-based. They're very experience-based, and those are things you can correct. Those are things that you can fix by simply giving him opportunities. The Giants don't have that much depth at cornerback, right? Behind those two boundary corners, maybe you have Aaron Robinson. Maybe he goes back into a nickel spot. You don't really have much. Maybe they bring back Fabian Moreau. Who knows? They have Zion Gilbert on the roster still. It's a graveyard. We got Rodarius Williams coming back from the ACL injury. The Giants don't have a lot of depth at the position. So if you're looking for someone who could step in and maybe get some reps if there's any injury they need to supplement, Trey Hawkins is a pretty good fit. A lot of people are hoping he's like the Woolens of this draft class for the Giants. Obviously, that would be a dream come true. But when you're looking at Trey Hawkins, Anthony, what makes you excited about him? Why do you think he can be a starter at the NFL level? And, what do you think his role will be in 2023, given the lack of depth on this quarterback unit?
Yeah, one thing that I'll say, ask me what I like about him. One thing that really jumps out to me, the violence that he plays with. Trey Hawkins for a cornerback is a hard hitter. He has some hits on his film that will actually make your jaw drop. You see guys go flying, like leveled off of their feet by Trey Hawkins. So that's always exciting, right? As a football fan, I mean, listen, it's a violent game. It's a very physical game. Sometimes it's fun to watch these guys blow each other up, right? You just love to see a cornerback level a running back in the open field. You don't see it very often, but Trey Hawkins has a few plays on his film where he does that. And that's something that Wink Martindale definitely likes. Wink Martindale loves aggression. He loves physicality. So when you see a guy like Trey Hawkins over at Old Dominion, small school, but laying some big hits, that's always exciting. That's one thing that I do really like. But what do I envision for Trey Hawkins in 2023? Well, it's kind of hard to tell because, yeah, there is kind of a lack of depth for the Giants in that cornerback room, but I wouldn't say it's a lack of numbers. It's just a lack of quality, right? So I think they have the quantity. There are a bunch of guys there who can compete on this roster that play kind of safety or corner or slot. There's a ton of names that you already mentioned, a few of them: Darnay Holmes, Aaron Robinson, Cordell Flott. I mean, there's three cornerbacks right there, and none of those three have technically been given a starting job yet. So Trey Hawkins could be added to the mix there. So there's a lot of guys. It's just not a lot of high quality players on the back end of the Giants roster in terms of their defensive backfield. So Trey Hawkins does have an opportunity here. If he goes into the summer, like we've said many, many times before, that slot cornerback spot is wide open right now. I think that's anybody's game. It was Darnay Holmes last year, but let's be honest, he struggled in many facets of the game. We all like Cordell Flott, but he's never really played in the slot, and he doesn't really contribute much in the run defense department, right? And then, of course, Aaron Robinson, just a guy who has not been able to stay on the field. So if Trey Hawkins is able to stay healthy throughout the summer, prove that he can contribute in the running game, and prove that he's better in coverage than a couple of these other guys, he could steal that slot cornerback job. Now, he might not necessarily be the ideal candidate for that job, sixth round rookie draft pick. You don't always want those guys thrusted into the starting lineup immediately, but it's just worth noting this kid does have a window of opportunity to get into the starting lineup. Like, there is a legitimate shot because that position is so wide open. But what do I envision for him? I think first half of the season, you probably see him contribute on special teams. One of the things that I really like about the Trey Hawkins draft selection is the fact that he is a freak athlete who can contribute on special teams. Now, I opened this up saying I love the physicality he plays with. I love how hard he hits some of these players. Well, that just sounds like a great gunner, right? Someone who flies down the field and just lays someone out. That's Trey Hawkins. That's what he does. So at the next level, I could see him being a very good gunner and special teams player for the New York Giants very early on. And if he does that, hopefully he develops some of those skills, gets a little bit better in some other areas in practice and training, and then maybe he does find a role in the Giants defense. But I do think in year one, he's probably a second stringer. If they are as high on him as the reports indicate, and if he does have the potential that the Giants believe that he has, he probably starts off as a second stringer. So let's say that Adoree Jackson gets banged up for a few games. Just looking at his career history, he traditionally does miss a few games per season. If that were to happen, Trey Hawkins might get an opportunity to start one or two games during the regular season. Totally possible. Or if the Giants feel like they're comfortable with him playing in the slot, don't discount the ability that this kid has to steal that position from a guy like a Darnay Holmes or an often injured Aaron Robinson. So I do think that there is an avenue for Trey Hawkins to see some pretty significant playing time on the defense. But Alex, when you're looking at this kid, again, the physicality, the hard hits, and the speed, the straight line speed from that 40-yard dash to get downfield, how much of an impact do you think a rookie like that can realistically have on special teams as he continues to develop his skills and maybe find his way onto the defense?
I mean, look, you can always work with athleticism, and that's kind of what the point of this entire draft class was across the board, except for maybe like specific players like JMS, for example, or John Michael Schmitz is not the best athlete in the world, but they needed a center, and he was one of the best on the board, so you go and address that problem. But the Giants made it a priority to improve the speed and athleticism across the board, right? You look at Paris Campbell, one of the fastest receivers in the NFL. You look at Darren Waller, arguably the fastest tight end in the NFL. You look at some of the guys that we just drafted, Deonte Banks, one of the best athletic defensive backs that we've seen in the last decade. Trey Hawkins, another guy with ridiculous speed, ridiculous size, ridiculous strength. Across the board, the Giants addressed this concern of athleticism because, look, the reality is that when you have below average athletes on an NFL roster, there's a limitation to their ceiling, right? You're capping their ceiling. They can only go so far. You look at maybe, for example, I'll use Julian Love, right? Not the best athlete in the world. His ceiling was an average player at a couple different positions, but because he was such a smart player, he was able to adapt and provide some substantial value for the Giants. But if you look at a player like Xavier McKinney, like an above average athlete, even I think his combine numbers weren't even that great. It's probably not even a good example. But if you look at maybe someone like Budda Baker, like ridiculous athlete, his ceiling just continues to get higher and higher because he has that level of athleticism. If he has the work ethic and he continues to refine his skill set, the sky's the limit for some of these guys. And I think that when you look at Deonte Banks, Trey Hawkins, especially when you're in the late rounds, like a 6th round draft pick, you go for athletic upside because you're not looking for starters in the 6th round. If you stumble upon a starter in the 5 to 7th rounds in undrafted free agent territory, I mean, like, look, after the 6th round, they could be undrafted free agents nonetheless. Like, that could be the reality. But you might as well take a shot on a guy with some good work ethic and high-end athleticism because you can mold those players. They can serve a specific role for you. As you mentioned, Trey Hawkins prides himself on tackling on the boundary, right? So that's a good thing. Like, you like to see that from a cornerback. He may not be the most, like, elevated in terms of football IQ because of where he's coming from in Old Dominion. He may not have a lot of experience against top-end collegiate talent and NFL-level talent, which he will soon. But we do know one thing. He puts it all on the field. He leaves it all on the field. He will go in there tackling. He will go in there trying to make a play. He's very aggressive. He's got the size, and you can work with that. You can develop players like that. And if long-term he ends up becoming a starter for us, this may be one of the best draft classes we've had in a very long time because it is incredibly difficult to find starting corners that are immediately impactful, right? I mean, like last year you see Sauce Gardner. That's the primary one. But look at like Jeff Okudah. Everyone thought he was going to be a superstar, and he's been a bust. They had just traded him away from the Detroit Lions. So you never really know what's happening, but Jeff Okudah was never this elite athlete. He was just fundamentally sound. I do love Deonte Banks because of that athletic profile, but also he's just a great player because he's also refined with his fundamentals, Like he's like Trey Hawkins if Trey Hawkins played at a bigger school and was just fundamentally great and, excelled against players that are going to the NFL now. So I do like that they kind of went after like a Deonte Banks replica, but it just isn't really there yet in terms of his experience. So that's the best way I can kind of, identify what Trey Hawkins has to offer. But I do really like this player. I hit him up. We're going to see what happens. Maybe he'll answer back. We can get him on the podcast. That would be pretty cool to see what he can do. Always trying to get some good stuff for you guys. But, Anthony, I guess looking back at this secondary, what is your major concern right now for them? I think strong safety remains probably our biggest question mark.
No, yeah, I would agree with that. I think strong safety is the biggest question mark. Listen, I feel a lot more comfortable with our cornerback duo now that we have Deonte Banks. I mean, I know that you were excited by the Deonte Banks pick, but I was even more excited. Like, I loved that selection. This was a player that I did really like ahead of the 2023 NFL Draft. Watched a great breakdown of him by that franchise guy, and I instantly was like, this would be a phenomenal prospect for the New York Giants. I couldn't even believe it when they made that trade up one spot to draft him. I was over the moon happy with the Deonte Banks selection. So I feel a lot more confident in this defense going into 2023 in terms of the secondary because, listen, Adoree Jackson, I think that he really demonstrated to all Giants fans just how big of an impact a cornerback can have on a defense in the modern game. And again, I've referenced this multiple times on the show, but you look at that Week 16 matchup with the Minnesota Vikings, the Giants lost that game. They lost it very narrowly on like a record-setting field goal as time expired, but in that game, Justin Jefferson went for over 100 yards. He was a dominant force. No one in our secondary could even have a chance of slowing him down. Then you get to the wild card round. Justin Jefferson has less than 50 yards in that game with 0 touchdowns. Adoree Jackson was on the field for that one, wasn't on the field for the first matchup that the Giants lost. He literally was arguably the reason the difference between winning and losing that game. So there you go, Giants fans. Now you learn that lesson. Cornerback has a massive impact on a defense. But let's take a look at the secondary cornerback slot because we did get into Philly and we did get pummeled by Philly. And one of the reasons why is because we didn't have enough on defense to match up with all of their skill position players, including both of their wide receivers, right? We saw Devontae Smith score a big, long touchdown in the regular season. We saw A.J. Brown have some big plays in the postseason. But now that the Giants have 2 competent cornerbacks, this defense is infinitely better. Again, we'll see what Deonte Banks develops into. We'll see how good he is as a rookie. We've seen some really good cornerback prospects enter the NFL and just not pan out. You mentioned him. Jeff Okudah is the perfect example. Everyone said he is the most polished, pro-ready, sure thing at the cornerback spot. Was drafted 3rd overall are all complete busts so far throughout his career. So you never know. I'll never make a guarantee on any of these prospects, but I do really like Deonte Banks. And if he's coached properly, if he sets his game right and his playing style translates to the next level, he could be special. So I feel a lot more confident in general in the cornerback spot. Again, the depth there's a lot of quantity. Hopefully some quality comes out of this group. Maybe someone develops. Maybe Darnay Holmes takes a big step this summer. Who knows? Maybe Aaron Robinson stays healthy. We haven't really seen what he provides, but if he stays healthy, maybe we could see something special there. And again, Trey Hawkins, a sleeper pick that the Giants are really high on. But my biggest question mark, as you just mentioned, is the strong safety position. I don't really know what the Giants' plan there is right now. I think Dane Belton is the plan, but if you look at Dane Belton's career history, he really played a lot more free safety and slot cornerback than he did strong safety throughout college and throughout that rookie season that he just had. No one on the Giants roster right now is actually a full-time strong safety throughout their career. They don't have anyone just yet. Javarius Owens, another guy, they just drafted him in the 7th round out of Houston. Player that a lot of analysts were really high on. He got a 4th-round projection. Giants stole him in the 7th, but again, throughout his entire collegiate career, played free safety. So I don't know what the Giants' plan is at strong safety, and I know that they do plan on running the Wink Martindale positionless defense, so maybe they don't need a career-defined strong safety in the mix to get by, but I do think that it is worth noting that the Giants don't necessarily have a lot of talent in their secondary that can move into the box and make an impact. So that's where my area of concern with this Giants defense really lies. But Alex, when you're looking at some of the back end players on this roster, right, in the secondary, that is, Trey Hawkins of the world, or Darius Williams, you mentioned him, Aaron Robinson, Darnay Holmes, some of these guys who are Cordell Flott as well, who aren't the established starters, right, like Xavier McKinney, like Deonte Banks, some of these guys who aren't established starters. How confident do you feel in that group? And do you have maybe some massive concerns that no one does rise to the occasion and really establish themselves as competent starters this upcoming season?
I mean, look, I'm always scared. The Giants are one injury away at most positions from having a freaking fire. You know what I mean? Just an absolute blaze. You lose Banks or Jackson and you're back to square one. You're supplementing with Zion freaking Gilbert or Fabian Moreau or Nick McLeod. And we know how that experiment went. Not very good. Fabian Moreau did his best and he had some decent games, but, he can't stand up against, top receivers in the league. It's not going to happen. So, do I have concerns? Yes, the Giants lack depth at a lot of positions, guys. Receiver, they built out the depth. I feel a little bit more confident about that this year. Tight end, Waller and Bellinger, like the depth there. Offensive line, we're still working on things. We don't really have much tackle depth, so if we lose one of those tackles, we're in big trouble. Guard, you have Josh Azudi, you have Ben Bredesen. I like our depth there, to be honest. At least a little bit more than we have in the past. I'm not going to say I love it. I'm okay with it considering the context of what the absolute crap that we've had in the trenches. Defensively, pass rush, we don't have much depth. O'Shane Ximines, Ellerson, Smith, I don't trust him at all. He hasn't been healthy for 2 years. O'Shane Ximines, I like him. I think he can be a serviceable supplement. But interior defensive line, I feel a lot better now with Nunez Roche, and I feel good about Ashawn Robinson. So, we've taken some big steps forward in building out the depth of some of these positions. Linebacker, Bobby Okereke, obviously of Darian Beavers coming back, Micah McFadden, Gerard Davis. I don't really know who's our LB2 yet. I think that's to be seen. I would imagine Darian Beavers would be the ideal starter if we had to guess right now. I think he's more of a complete player than the rest of them. But he's coming off the ACL tear, so we don't really know. I don't really like our depth at linebacker. I think that Bobby Okereke is a huge step in the right direction, but it takes time to build some of these positions. We're not going to be able to fix everything in one offseason. We need 3-4 offseasons to really build a strong structure and foundation of this team. Secondary, like safety, we have no depth there. There's no depth. Behind Xavier McKinney, Love was there to help supplement at an average level. Now we're supplementing at a below average level. So, Bobby McCain, he's getting paid a veteran minimum for a reason. He was not very good. He's okay supplement. He's a cheap man's Julian Love, essentially. So when you're looking at this Giants team, they have some players that are good depth. We have some positions that have some solid depth, but there's a lot of spots that one injury and we're in trouble and we're in big trouble. So we got to hope that new turf that they just put in MetLife really helps us mitigate those injuries, because that could end up being the difference maker for us next season. But again, our starters are good. I love our starting roster. I love our starting team. I think that the Giants have done a tremendous job filling those positions. Now it's just about building out the depth. And I think that's ultimately what the process is going to look like. And hopefully some of these late round picks pan out and develop nicely so they can help us in those categories.
Yeah, and listen, I'm crossing my fingers and praying to God that some of those late round picks do develop and pan out for us and hopefully become some eventual starters or at least some impactful depth pieces. Listen, I really like Javarius Owens' 7th round pick. I do like Trey Hawkins' 6th round pick. I feel pretty good about this whole Giants draft class, and I do think that they added a good amount of depth to the back end of their roster towards the end of the draft, which I think is something that's really important. Plus, of course, we've talked endlessly about the impact starters that we feel the Giants drafted with each of their first 3 selections in this draft class. Overall, a job well done by Joe Shaden. But as he mentioned, games are not won in April. Time will tell how these picks really pan out. We'll see who does and doesn't make that impact. But I am excited to hear that the Giants are hopeful that both Banks and Hawkins will be able to make some sort of an impact in year one. Of course, it's going to be really, really exciting watching this season unfold and updating you all on these players and how they perform. So if you are new to the channel, please make sure to subscribe, ring the bell so you don't miss an episode. Leave a like if you did enjoy this episode and comment your thoughts on the topic down below. And if you're listening on Apple or Spotify, please make sure to leave us a 5-star review. But without further ado, we will catch you all in the next one. Have a good one, and let's go Giants.